Okay, Chapter 4, Fluctuations. Any electric charge, if the particles are moving, has a magnetic field associated with it. Electrons with a negative charge attract protons or ions with positive charges, and vice versa. Gravitational fields are associated with such magnetic fields. So yes, it is apparently possible to warp space-time with just an electric current. Fort and Roman, Negative Energy and Wormholes. Aries wakes up from a strange dream. She was back in Kira's room, but she was eating ham and walking around on his futon, and Kira spoke to her as if she were a baby. She decides that she must have taken last night's encounter with her into her sleep. When she enters the dining hall, she scans the room for Kira but can't see him. She looks into the camera above the monitor at the food counter. Her name appears and the two small compartment doors open. She takes 2 bottles out of one and a piece of bread out of the other. There's an almost empty table in the far corner of the cafeteria, but she decides not to risk getting into any kind of fight today. She sits at the only empty chair at the table, surrounded by younger kids. Except for the occasional giggle, they eat quietly. There are security personnel, 2 men and 1 woman, dotted throughout the room. They are mostly here to watch the younger kids and are only to interfere if and when something gets completely out of hand. Only twice has Aries witnessed them going into action. Once during a medical emergency, when someone choked on a piece of apple. The other, when one of the older boys suddenly started screaming without any previous inclination to do so. He had been sitting alone at his table when he'd suddenly begun to scream until the 2 men had physically taken him to the floor while the woman injected him with something. It wasn't clear what he had screamed at, but from where Aries sat, she thought it might have been one of the flat-screen monitors. But she could have been wrong. The whole thing hadn't lasted more than 45 seconds, but the incident had left a permanent impression on her. Sometimes she thinks about what could have driven the boy to freak out like that. The screams were filled with rage and anger, but Aries could hear the pain in them as well. The pain and the sense of utter powerlessness. She has not seen him since. She opens the cap to her first drink, a mixture of synthetic algae and amino acids in liquid form. It tastes nasty, and she usually washes it down with the content of the second bottle, vitamin-enriched water. The slight iron taste of that she gets rid of with the bread. She takes a sip of the water while watching the room and letting the individual voices of the kids meld together into one sound, one big murmur. When she looks at the bottle, she sees a handwritten arrow drawn on the label. It points downward. Now she sees that there's part of a napkin stuck to the bottom of the bottle. She picks it up nonchalantly and palms it. It's upside down. She has no trouble deciphering it in one glance, despite its small letters. Like the wind over forgotten plains, when the storm clouds whisper names, like the girl that came from light, like the bird, it was born of night. Aries smiles at the fact that there's possibly a poet hidden away in a room somewhere, flying below the radar, and as of yet completely undetected, despite the corporation's airtight social surveillance system. For reasons unbeknown to her, this note, this scribbled piece of barely average phrasing, gives her more hope than anything she has encountered in a long time. She crumples the napkin into a tiny ball inside her palm and slips it into one of her coverall pockets. The water bottle goes into the other, while the bread stays in her hand. She gets up and places the tray onto the belt on the opposite wall of the room. When she turns around, she almost runs into Seth. Or better, he almost runs into her. "I'm sorry," he says quietly, while maneuvering around her. "No problem," she answers. He looks pale, tired. His eyes are red and the spikes in his hair are gone. That concerns her more than his pale look. Their eyes meet. Then he looks away. "Are you okay?" Aries asks. "Yes," he replies. "I'm sorry for what I did the other day. It won't happen again. It won't happen again, I promise." His voice trails off and he walks away. He seems smaller. Aries wants to follow him and tell him that it's okay and that it wasn't a big deal and that she's sorry for what she said about cockroaches and that she didn't really mean what she said. Seeing him like this is worse than when he bullied her the other day. but he's gone before she can move, and she doesn't want to draw any attention to him or herself. She leaves the cafeteria and climbs the ladders toward electrical. The brief encounter with Seth has left her strangely affected. What happened to him? Were there any additional measures the corporation had taken after the incident yesterday morning? This brings her thoughts to CJ, who she still hasn't heard a word from. Aries is aware of the sting of guilt in the back of her mind, telling her that she should have asked about her sooner. I'll do it today, she promises herself. Finding the hawk last night and subsequently stumbling into Kira's room so unexpectedly has completely blotted out her concern for CJ. She puts on her gear at the locker and enters the command center. Ty stands there, hunched over some blueprints and completely focused on them. You're early, he says without looking up. I am, she answers. She can't remember him ever telling her anything other than that she was either early or late. She knows he doesn't mean anything by it other than that by now it's just banter between friends. What you got? Aries asks, ready for work. When she looks over Ty's shoulder, she sees a blueprint that she hasn't seen before. It shows the core of the building from above as a round center. From there, and like spokes in a wheel, 8 arms reach outward, crossing through Tier 1 all the way to the 3rd tier. Horizontal maintenance shafts. Tiers 4 and 5 have their own maintenance crew, so does Tier 6. The 3 groups don't usually communicate with each other. Tiers 1 through 3 are on the same, self-contained system of heat, cooling, and power. 4 and 5 have their own utility structure as well. 6 is completely separate from the rest as it houses the Super Rich and Cellcom's headquarters. The shafts on the large blueprint end in Tier 3. We're getting a bunch of current fluctuations in some of the exchange units, Ty tells her while pointing at the blueprints. I want you to check them out, each one. There are 4 in each arm, 8 arms, so we're talking about 32 units. It'll take a couple of hours for each one, so you'll be busy for a few days. Sound good? Yes, sir, Aries answers. One thing, though. Ty looks up from his blueprint and straight at her. What is it? You'll be taking the lift. The units are on the 282nd floor. No problem, Aries replies. You're such a bad liar, Ty says. One day you're gonna get caught. I know, but I'm gonna have you to bail me out. Ty grins as he takes out the diag, a small rectangular box that has several wires attached to it. Its greasy exterior belies its wondrous capabilities. Among many other things, it measures the smallest fluctuations in electrical current. Aries hangs it over her shoulder. I can get Bailey to go with you, Ty says, while checking the batteries on the walkie-talkie and handing it to her. I'm okay, Aries replies. You sure? I'm good. Okay. Her smile hides her relief that Ty is not insistent. Bailey has made a couple of strange remarks toward her when they worked together in the past. At the moment they happened, they went straight over her head, but when she thought about them afterwards, she began to feel creeped out by them, and subsequently by him. He lives in the 2nd tier and must be in his 50s. She doesn't think he's married and doesn't know anything about him other than that she never feels 100% comfortable in his presence, even though, aside from those 2 remarks, their interaction is usually distant but professional. Ready? Ty brings her out of her train of thought. Yes, Aries answers. She checks the walkie-talkie and clips it onto her belt. They climb up a couple of metal stairs, 2 levels up, and arrive at 2 small cabins mounted next to each other and to a steel column at the outermost edge of the large, round opening in the center. Each cabin fits 2 people plus some material, or 1 person and a larger item. They are part of a system of lifts connecting large sections of the vertical structure at the innermost core of the building. From the lift, one can see far down until blackness swallows all light coming in from the floors over 200 stories below. Aries feels her heart pounding within her chest when she approaches the lift. She stifles the impulse to check each of the steel bolts connecting it to the column, together with the cogwheels that transfer power to pull the lift upward and to break its descent when it comes down. There's so much that can go wrong with a machine like this, she thinks. Let me know your progress once you're up there, Ty says, as he opens the metal louver and lets Aries step into the lift. The distance between the individual steel rods in the grid are such that one can see straight through it. Without spending another thought on this and thereby exponentially increasing her unease, she pushes the numbered buttons on the keypad, 282. After hitting the completely greased over enter button, the lift begins its ascent. Not quietly though. There is a slight delay between her pushing the button and the lift actually rising. Then there's a snapping sound when the brakes disengage and the motor begins to turn the cogwheels. The sounds are utterly disconcerting. One glance past the steel grid into the abyss below is enough to make Aries dizzy, so she looks straight ahead, breathing through her nose. Deep breaths. She's fully aware of the small camera mounted in one of the corners of the lift interior. Her face, she knows, is an emotionless mask. After an eternity, the lift stops, not without shaking and sputtering loudly. Aries exits, glad to have solid ground under her feet once more. As she orients herself on the floor, she sees the 8 doors leading into the maintenance shafts. She heads for the first one. "I'm here. Opening door number 1, she says into the walkie-talkie. "Sounds good," Ty answers. "Oh, by the way, CJ's sick. I got a message from her parents this morning. They don't know when she'll be back." "Okay." Aries approaches the first door. This floor is basically a large circular landing with doors leading to the 8 shafts. The rest is covered with rusted steel plates. Aries has no clue what's behind them. Aware of the camera right above the door, she punches in the code she got from Ty. The light switches from red to blue, and the door opens with a slight suction sound. "Did they say what CJ had?" Aries asks into the walkie-talkie while she enters the long shaft. "No." "Okay, talk to you when I'm done." When she enters the narrow shaft, she has to duck her head, as it is just under 5 feet high. She walks along the green LED lights that illuminate the floor and ceiling. When she's about 10 feet into the shaft, the door behind her closes again, hermetically sealing itself into the frame. This is the 3rd time she's been up here. Once with Ty and once with CJ, but being alone in the narrow shaft is a completely different experience from being with someone. "Approaching the unit," she says into the walkie-talkie. There's no answer. "Ty, I'm approaching the unit. Just thought I'd let you know." Nothing. Just before she's about to push the button again, Ty's voice comes on. "Got it. Sorry I couldn't answer right away." She registers the relief she feels when she hears his voice on the other end and kneels down to open the trap door in the floor. She flips on her headlamp and climbs down the 5 rungs of the narrow ladder. This brings her into a cube-like space. The 6 by 6 by 6 feet cubicle holds servers and other equipment that line the 4 walls of the space. She pulls the strap of the diag over her shoulder and places it onto the floor in front of one of the units. She takes off the front cover and connects some of the wires of the diag with contacts in the unit. To find the right contact for one of the wires, she looks at the electrical blueprint Ty had placed in the bag. She turns on the small screen on the diag and the oscilloscopic image appears. It shows the wavelength of the current represented in a curved sinus line. She compares the image on the screen with the one she has on a small pocket card. They're identical. She disconnects the clips, closes the panel, and moves to the next one. When she opens the front panel, she hears a sound, not unlike air escaping from a sealed container. She gets up and peers through the opening in the floor of the shaft. From there, she can see that the door is open. Maybe an inch, probably less. That's odd, she thinks. As far as she knows, this can only happen when someone with the proper authorization code stands outside. "Ty?" Her voice echoes in the long shaft. She stands still, listening intently and looking into the semi-darkness of the shaft. "Ty, you there?" She climbs out, and before she reaches the door, Ty's voice comes through the walkie-talkie. "You okay up there?" Aries is completely startled, so much so that she has to catch her breath. Then she grabs the doorknob and opens it. There's nobody there. "Aries?" Ty's voice seems louder than usual. "Yes, I'm here. My door just opened." "Come again?" "The door to the shaft opened while I was down in the first unit." There's a pause. Aries becomes aware of how quiet it is up here. "That's strange. I don't know how this can happen without someone standing there. It closes automatically once you step away from it. Let me know if it happens again. Okay, Aries replies. She walks away from the door. It closes once more, sealing itself into the frame. It just closed, she says into the walkie-talkie. Okay, Ty's voice answers. She climbs back down through the trapdoor and continues with her task. She finishes 4 of the 8 shafts without incident. In the second unit of the 5th shaft, she finds the irregularity. She sees it right away when she turns on the oscilloscope in the diag. The waves on the screen are completely different from those of all the other units. Not only does the shape of the sinus curve look different from anything she has ever seen before, but the parts of the sinus curve going downward into the negative actually go slightly backwards. If Aries is not mistaken, that's completely impossible. Ty, you there? Yes, you got something? Ty's voice echoes through the small, cube-like space. Looks like it. I think I found the glitch. Second unit in shaft number 5. The image looks very strange. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. Can you take a picture? Sure, I'll take a screenshot. That's my girl. Why don't you come down? We can go up there together tomorrow and fix it. Sounds good. I'll be down in a minute. Aries pushes the button on the diag to capture what's on the screen in the internal flash drive. Then she takes off the wires, puts everything back into the shoulder bag and climbs out of the trapdoor. She arrives at the door and punches in the code. Nothing happens. She punches the code in again. Nothing. She pulls the doorknob and pushes, tries to move the door. No results. She taps the camera above the doorframe with her finger a few times. Then she walks away several feet, turns and comes back toward the camera, looking up. Nothing happens. What's going on? She asks the silence. Ty, now my door won't open. Ty, you there? Ty, can you hear me? No sound comes from the walkie-talkie. Ty, without warning, the lights in the shaft go out. She stands in pitch black until she remembers the headlamp and turns it on. The bright beacon illuminates the shaft about 15 feet into it. Behind it is blackness. She turns and looks into the camera again. Come on, open the door, she says, half out of frustration. The other half is the slowly building uneasiness that begins to creep up in her. This can't be coincidence. As she looks into the camera, her neck hair stands up. She turns her head quickly to see if there's anyone behind her. But the shaft is empty. All she sees is the flickering light beam of her headlamp. She looks back toward the camera. She begins to breathe more heavily, feels fear rise up within her. The feeling of panic is all too familiar to her, but it normally only occurs when she's somewhere high up. Small dark spaces don't bother her. This one is different. She registers that she feels trapped. More out of instinct than anything else, she turns her headlamp off and slides to the floor, her back resting against the door. She closes her eyes. If this is some kind of game, she can certainly play it. Ty knows where she is. Worst case scenario would be for him to have to come up here and manually open the door. Aries tries to relax. She sits still for a few minutes, calming her breath. Out of the blackness, an image appears inside her eyelids. It's Kira's room. There's no sign of him or the hawk. The walls and ceiling show the top of a mountain. The vistas reach far into the distance. A nest is perched on the rock and an eagle is about to land in it. It has something in its beak that it distributes among 3 young birds. And now it dawns on Aries. Kira is running a bird of prey program. Born of night, she thinks. Are you there? She whispers while holding the image of the hawk in her mind. Nothing. After a few moments she shakes her head, feeling silly for expecting some kind of an answer. The hawk's scream cuts into the silence of her mind. She hears it as if she sits right next to her, but on the inside, not outside of her. Aries holds the silence for a minute or so. Born of night, she thinks. After a few moments she hears the cry again. She's communicating with me, Aries thinks. Are you talking to me? She says. She hears the cry once more, and then she feels it. A presence within her, very light, like a fine brush on her soul. The touch, as fragile as it seems, lets Aries see the entire hawk at once. She sees her intelligence, her curiosity, her unbound energy and her strength, her health, even her hunger. At the same time, she realizes that the hawk sees her as well. For an instant, Ares contemplates hiding from her, withdrawing and showing her only aspects that she wants her to see. But then she decides that she doesn't want to do that. So she opens herself up and shows her everything as well. Her joys, her fears, her loneliness, and her wish for company, her past and her wish to be free. That most of all she offers her. She tells her of her dream to see the stars one night and to stand under them out in the open. For a fleeting moment, Ares catches the trace of a memory from the hawk. A moonlit night with the land far below and the stars in the darkened sky above. And then Ares makes the connection. She has dreamed this. For the last few weeks she has dreamed of flying. Now she knows why. She must have communicated with the hawk then. But how is this even possible? Part of her is not convinced that this isn't a figment of her imagination created by her strong wish for companionship. And with the doubt, the hawk's presence fades until it is gone. What's left is the darkness around her and the slight sting of loss of something that seemed to have given her comfort for a moment. Once gone, Ares questions that it was real to begin with. Then, as sudden as they darkened, the lights in the shaft come back on and the door opens. Ares almost falls backward as the door opens outward. She gets up and moves away from the shaft. When she's 10 feet away, the door closes. She enters the elevator. Going downward is usually worse than up, but this time her fear is less than before. Not by much, but enough not to feel sick to her stomach. And when she leaves the lift on the 205th floor, she cannot deny the faint, yet somehow lasting impression her encounter with Born of Night has left with her. This is very odd, Ty says when Ares shows him the screenshot. But not only is it odd, it's basically impossible. Why is that? Ares asks, looking over his shoulder. The Diag sits on the large desk of the command center amid the stacks of blueprints with Ty hunched over it. You see this curve here? Ty traces the sinus curve on the oscilloscope's image. Yes. The oscilloscope basically measures electric current over time, usually in milliseconds. The closer the peaks of the curves are together, the higher the frequency of the current. Because it takes time for the current to flow, the sinus wave always goes forward. Always. This one doesn't, Ares says. Nope, it does not. Which makes me think that this must have been an error in the screen image rather than in the unit itself. Why can't it be an odd fluctuation in the electric current? Ty looks at her as if considering how much to tell her. It can't be an odd fluctuation in the electric current because, if this is correct, the current would flow backward, in time. What? Ares sees on Ty's face a reflection of her own puzzlement. If current flows from point A to point B in a certain period of time, it flows through point A and then, let's say 1 millisecond later, crosses point B. Then again 1 millisecond later, point C, and so on. You with me so far? Yes, kind of. In order for this image to appear on the oscilloscope, the current would have had to, for a very short period of time, roughly 1/100th of a millisecond, flow backward in time, as the oscilloscope measures the amount of current in a given time going from point A to point B. I got it. Good. So the image must be wrong because current can't flow backward in time. That is correct. Is there anything that could theoretically cause this? Theoretically, yes. What is it? The only thing that could theoretically cause this fluctuation in the electric current would be a wormhole. A wormhole? Yes. And I said theoretically, for there's no proof, only a theoretical concept of a possible theory. Both look at the image for a while. What's next? Ares asks. You tell me. I guess we'll go up there again with another Diag and see if this one is broken, Ares says. That is exactly what we're going to do. I'll run some self-diagnostics in the meantime. Ty looks at his wristwatch. Your shift is almost over, kiddo. Why don't you get out a little earlier today? For excellent work, well done. You'll still have plenty of overtime to use. When she leaves electrical and makes her way down the ladder toward the dining room, she formulates a plan in her head. Go visit Kira tonight. Find the marked air vent from inside the ducts and read up on hawks. and if not for the nagging feeling that this wasn't the end of it, that there must be another reason for the fluctuations and the strange behavior of the door, together with the almost 20-minute long blackout in shaft number 5, she will be content. Computer-generated report. Egan Aries, D, ID number 4746 POC 201-001-7485. ESM, evidence for social misconduct retrieved. Evidence object, napkin, partial. Tag 8 point. Contents 100% readable. Content reads, like the wind over forgotten plains, when the storm clouds whisper names, like the girl that came from light, like the bird 'twas born of night. 138. Source unknown. Further action pending evaluation. Place subject on shortlist for red surveillance.